Welcome everybody. As every week or every second week, we try to have these virtual town halls on the most defining topics of our time. And obviously democracy and the erosion of democracy is one of those topics that sadly is touching all our lives. Even if you live in established democracies, the risk of a gradual erosion of your rights is there. And sadly, we see all over the planet that many countries that used to be more welcoming, more liberal, more open, are rolling backwards. A couple of weeks ago, we had a wonderful event, a live digital protest with Leo here. There is a spokesperson for BelgoCuba, an organization in Belgium, in Brussels, trying to advocate for freedom and democracy in Cuba, but obviously I will let him introduce himself even better. And through his activism, he has inspired a lot of us in learning more about the situation in Cuba, because we have noticed this narrative where often Cuba is seen as this socialist heaven with some flaws, but actually the reality is way more dire, is way more severe, and as Leo will outline, there is much to do for freedom and democracy in Cuba, and all of us should be aware of it and offer a hand and support Cubans abroad at home to fight back and gain back their rights. So with this, I'm Andrea Venzon. I'm one of the co-founders of Now. Maybe Colombe, you can also quickly introduce yourself, so then we leave the stage to our speaker.
Yes, hi, I'm Colombe and I'm the other co-founder of Now, and I'm thrilled to be hosting this town hall with Leo. For everyone watching this online later, this is a members only event, so our members will have more chances to directly interact with Leo and have more in-depth conversation. We'll upload those events later online so everyone can watch them. With this in mind, Leo, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I think the first question we would like to ask us is to tell us a bit about the history of the democratic struggle in Cuba. As we said, it's widely misunderstood. So if you can tell us about the last few decades and what happened, it would be super useful for the debates.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I think you guys are doing a wonderful job. And when I saw you guys talking about democracies and Hong Kong and Myanmar and everything, I was like, hey, don't forget about Cuba, because we're actually in the same struggle. So, I think that when we see the situation in Cuba, in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Russia, Belarus, Myanmar, what we're seeing is this fight for freedom and democracy against totalitarian communist regimes. So we have all that in common with Eritrea, with North Korea, Syria, Pakistan, all this. So in Cuba, actually, a lot of people don't know, but since 1959, we had a communist revolution, which in nature, when it first started in 1959, it was not a communist revolution. It was a democratic revolution, because we wanted to restore the 1940 Constitution, which was the democratic Constitution of the Republic of Cuba. So Fidel Castro and his band of bandits, because that's what they were, promises to the people. And in our quest for democracy at the time, people supported the revolution only after he actually triumphed. He never restored the 1940 Constitution, and he started reigning through presidential decrees until making a new constitution. And I think we've seen this in Myanmar as well, where the regimes get into power and then they start changing the constitution and so on. So that's what happened in Cuba. Since 1959, we really have been under a communist regime. We have, there's a lot of misconception about the country because they have been expert at propaganda. So since 1963, I think if I got it right, they actually did what it was called the Tri-Continental Conference. And this is when they got leaders from 3 continents, which was Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And they started what it was, the Tri-Continental Conference, and then the OSPAL, which was a center for propaganda for all those 3 continents. And from Havana, there was a propaganda campaigns, always supporting revolutionary movements in all these different countries. For example, we have the fight in Angola, which Cubans went and fought. We had nothing to do with that. We sacrificed Cuban innocents there. So, what we see in Cuba is a regime that has exported this revolution, and it has been experts at telling people how through solidarity and using, for example, the premises of social justice and humanism to actually install a police state in front of the eyes of the world. And everyone knows, for example, if you see the new Freedom House report, we see that Cuba is not a free country, that is only a one-party system where other political parties are illegal. So we cannot have like, we don't have an opposition. Like our opposition really is very fragmented because everything that dissents is silence. Everything that is dissenting is illegal. So that's pretty much how it has been operating for the last 62 years. And since the 1990s, after the socialist camp actually fell, that's when they opened to tourism. So that's when we started seeing like more people coming from Europe, and then getting this idea that it was this very nice tropical place because they were going to resorts. So you know, you're not really seeing the reality that the Cuban people are living, and it's very it's dire. Like we're a country that we have no democratic memory because like our grandparents, our parents, us, like my nephews, for example, generation, we have been under this regime that we just don't know how to just liberate it, like from the claws of this regime. So that's pretty much where we're at. And then, you know, we also have to understand that we have 3.5 million people in exile. So when we're out, you know, in all these countries, in the US, in Europe, and we are telling people this is what's happening in Cuba, they don't believe us because they have this idea of like, oh, when they went on vacation, people were so nice, it was so nice. And you know, this is the biggest misconception, because when you go on vacation, that's not the reality. That's just like a little experience that you're paying for. So this is what we need to like get people to start realizing. It is not a tropical paradise. It really is like a jail. It's an island where, you know, right until 2017, there was no connection to the outside world. You know, the internet was prohibited. You know, right now they're doing the same thing they did in Myanmar. Every time that there's like a little like social outburst, they shut down communication. So like, you know, they use the same repressive mechanisms to silence the dissidents, and this is what we're seeing right now. And since COVID-19, where the economic situation has been even worse, we see that more repression has been happening because people have to stand in long lines to like get food, and we see the repression happening. Police like beating women, old people. It just doesn't matter. It's chaotic at the moment.
Very clear. Thank you, Leo. I immediately want to jump on something you said, especially nowadays the system of governance that Cuba has. Let's make it very practical. If I'm a Cuban that dissent with the government, like I don't agree with the policies of the regime, do I have a chance to start a political party? And from my understanding is no. Do I have a chance to stand for elections? Are there even free elections? Can you tell us a bit more about nowadays how the country is actually governed?
Yeah, well, since 1959, there has only been a one-party ruling party. That's it. It's the Communist Party of Cuba. Everything else is illegal. There's no, you cannot have like independent civil society organizations. Everything needs to be under the influence of the Communist Party. So there's no dissonance. There's, for example, right now we are seeing that there is an artist movement happening where, you know, people are singing, people are, you know, being more expressive, but they're getting cracked down on. For example, with the San Isidro movement, which actually, you know, we saw like a new music coming out of there as a sign of protest, but they actually cracked down on them, and then they will not let them express themselves. They take them to jail. So in Cuba, no, to answer your question, you cannot, you don't have a chance at doing politics and doing opposition the legal way. There are clandestine groups, and we have like, you know, people who are always going to fight for freedom inside, and we're always going to have our resistance, but it's very disorganized, because in Cuba we have the Stasi, the Cuban Stasi. It works the same way. It works where your neighbor could be the person informing about you. So they have created this like paranoia amongst the population, and they have make you feel like even your own brother could be the person who's going to turn you into the government. So people are afraid to even express their own opinions to their own family, and this is like the same way that it happened in East Germany. where same mechanism, and that's what we're living in Cuba. That's why it's very difficult. In 2012, one of the largest opposition leaders, which was Osvaldo Payá, who was actually able to create a movement inside of Cuba where he demanded to have the constitution changed and so on. He was actually murdered by the regime. So we do see extrajudicial killings. We do see dissidents who prefer to die in hunger strikes. So and the thousands and thousands of people who risk their lives in rafts to just like get to the United States. We have like thousands and thousands of people who have died just wanting to be free. And the fact that Cuba is an island, we have sort of been like in the middle of the ocean, just like saying, hey, help, and no one seems to be paying attention.
So how can we help? As in, like, so for me, Cuba is one of those cases where it's actually really hard, I think, for the international community to find a good solution, in the sense that until recently, for example, you had sanctions, right, from the US on Cuba. You had more, I think, at least from the US, you had a stronger sense of what's happening is not okay. As you mentioned at the beginning, I think in Europe, we still romanticized Cuba a lot and way too much. But what do you think are the ways for world leaders to, one, support the Cuban people and a democratic transition, and two, potentially, because we have here, and now we have a lot of activists all across the world working for freedom, how can people across the world help in doing so?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to create the awareness that this is not just like like this little little island that has been the victim of the United States. This is a very, very, very big misconception, because the United States is actually the host of the largest exile Cuban community. So if the United States is so bad, why are we all fleeing to the United States? Why is there 2 million Cubans like living there? So if the US is putting sanctions, and the embargo is very I guess controversial, it's because the Cuban community actually believes in this embargo. Why? Because what we don't remember is that this embargo was put there because the regime, when it came to power in 1959, nationalized and expropriated thousands and thousands of properties. They expropriated oil refineries, sugar mills, everything that was like foreign money, like foreign investment. They nationalized. They stole this from American companies, most of all. So the embargo was put there because there needs to be a how do you say this? Like, they need to pay for what they stole. So this is the main reason why this embargo is there, because there are claims that they need to pay. So that's one. The other thing is that they want us to negotiate with what they have made the biggest enemy in the history of Cuba. For example, since we're children and we are being indoctrinated by this regime. We are being told that the United States is evil, that the United States is our enemy, that they're going to invade us, that they're going to. So there's always this paranoia and misconception that we're under attack from the United States, and this is false. We are not under attack by the United States. The United States have no interest in attacking Cuba. We don't have anything. We are just an island with sun and beaches. There's no natural resources that can be exploited from us. We're just an island with sun and with beaches. So they don't want to attack us. So how can the world help us? First of all, don't visit Cuba. You're only enriching the government, because what they do is actually everything is controlled by the military. So like all the other money that's coming from the outside, all these resorts are really managed by the military. So when you're going to Cuba to have a fun time, you're actually enriching the military, which is the war machine that has the cannons pointing at the people. Because let's get real. Do you guys really think that Cuba has a chance at any kind of military confrontation with the United States? No. So all this military power is pointing inside, not outside. So this is what we need to understand. We are hostage in an island. That's what we are. We want for people to understand this. For like just until 2017, the Cubans inside the island did not know what the world was like outside. You know, I ate chocolate for the first time when I was 9 years old because I exiled to the United States. So like simple things like that. Like people, for example, in Cuba, we're an island, but it's illegal to fish. It's illegal to get on a little boat and go fish your food. That's illegal. For example, it's illegal to just do like just simple things. Just that just doesn't make sense. And what we need to understand, especially from Europeans, is that when you go and visit Cuba, while you're having a great, you know, vacation, what you're really are doing is enriching the Cuban regime that has the Cuban people really as like second-class citizens. Like they have no rights.
So that's pretty. First of all, thank you for this because I was never told. You know, for me, Cuba has been a place I've been wanting to visit just because I think it you know, the history and so on is extremely interesting and in a way quite fascinating. I now won't, but thank you for saying it because I think it's something we actually don't hear a lot, right? So for everyone watching, the first thing you can do is raise awareness about what's happening in Cuba, not to romanticize the place, and for people to actually realize what's happening. And second, not to partake in the government's and military's game by going to visit and enriching those actually cracking down on people. Leo, I know you also, for example, work to lobby the EU institutions and so on. So on the government side across the world, what can world leaders, let me rephrase, what can democratic world leaders do to support either the opposition or a democratic transition in Cuba?
Well, I think what, especially what the European Union can do, because I will talk a little more of the work that I'm focusing on, which is in the European Union, because actually since 2017, they signed an agreement, which is supposed to be a cooperation and political dialogue agreement. And what this is doing is actually they're sending a lot of like money, like aid, to Cuba, but they're sending it to projects that will never benefit the Cuban people. They actually like send all of since 2018, they have sent more than 200 million euros in aid, but this is not being reflected in benefiting the people. It just goes into projects that, you know, they always go bankrupt. Like, so it's like this corruption that is happening like constantly. And it's happening under the watch of the European Union. The European Union knows about this. The European Union knows that Cuba is a dictatorship, that there are constant violations of human rights. They know this. They continue to have a dialogue with them because they think that through dialogue, they will achieve change. But let me remind you that no regime, no totalitarian regime has ever vacated power like that. Here, we'll give it to you. I think that this is a fight the Cuban people are going to have to fight sooner or later. And we just hope that at this point where the Cuban people revolt, that the international community will understand why and support us. I will have to also say that in the long history of our Cuban nation, we have never had a passage of power that has been peaceful, not even under the time of the Republic. We were a colony of Spain. The way that we took Spain off our back was through a armed revolutionary independent movement. Then we became, neo-colonists of the United States. We took that off by giving them a piece of land and saying that they would like protect us. Then we became a satellite of then we had 3 coups d'etat, which in the time of the Republic, each president succeeded the other to coup d'etat. So like we have never had a peaceful passage of power. I really hope that this will be the first time that in Cuban history we have a peaceful passage of power, but I am not very optimistic about it. And I think that at one point when the people actually do revolt, I think that we will see a massacre from the state against our own people. And I think that we will go and we will have to see that in order to see freedom. That's not what I'm promoting. That's what I'm most afraid of. And, you know, looking at our history, I think that's the most realistic prediction.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you so much. I want to actually to read a question that we received in the chat, and I want to build on that. So there's Francesco that I'm reading for those that will follow the recording later. What do you think of the open letter that the EU ambassador to Cuba signed asking for Biden to end the embargo to the island? And I want to add to this question do you think that actually, instead of ending the embargo, that seems like counterproductive, I understand your message, do you think that actually countries should impose sanctions or stop aid to speed up this transition that you are hoping for?
Yeah, I think that whoever is asking for Biden to lift the embargo is not very informed what the embargo really is and how it became, because it's a law. The embargo is not just a presidential decree. Like Biden cannot lift this embargo. This has to be done by the United States Congress. So this is a law that was there to protect the benefit of the American people. So I personally, whenever I see someone advocating for the lift of the embargo, what I am seeing is a traitor, because what we're saying is we're going to lift all the crimes left unpunished, and we're going to forgive all the people who have died under this war machine that we have in our country, and we're just going to simply turn the page and forget about it. The only way that Cuba will be free, and the only way that we will actually have a transition to democracy, is through the justice system, through an international justice court that puts an accountability on those who have sequestered our country, on those who have killed like thousands and thousands of people, and those who have left 3.5 million people without a homeland. So what I think, most of all, instead of the UN or all these ambassadors that are asking for the United States to lift the embargo, no, that's not what we need. What we need is to bring these people to justice. Bring the tribunals. Like, we need a Cuban Nuremberg. We have thousands and thousands of people who have died. You know, I'm a victim of this regime. At 9 years old, my family and I had to leave because we were being, basically persecuted. We had mob attacks, and we're seeing this today. People go in front of like dissident families' houses and they start throwing rocks. They start painting their houses. It's like, the same mechanism that Hitler did. We see a lot of nationalism and socialism in Cuba. What we are not seeing is that, because it's Cuba, it cannot be Nazi. Yes, there is a regime that is working the same way that the Nazis did, the same way. And we are just not wanting to accept it. And this is really, I'm speaking to you from a victim's point of view. I'm not speaking to you from a story I heard. I'm speaking to you from someone who has suffered the persecution. Even today in Belgium, I'm persecuted by the government. They have like denigration campaigns to all the Cubans in Belgium. No, they tell them that I'm a terrorist, for example. And for example, now I have like 2 processes with the police because they're constantly like persecuting me, even here, because they want to even silence the people who live outside, so.
Well, thank you for having the courage to share your personal story. I can only imagine how sensitive it must be to do so. We're receiving a lot of questions, and before jumping and allowing people to directly interact with you, I just wanted to not play the devil's advocate, but ask the question that I saw a lot coming up on Instagram ahead of the talk. And it's the same questions that we get at now every time we advocate for sanctions or for tough measures on authoritarian places. So I think it would be useful for everyone, say, to address it. It basically goes like this. Okay, so if we don't lift an embargo and if we impose sanctions, Cuban people will suffer even more. And as a result, the government will gain in popularity because it will be able to demonize the rest of the world. So that's some of the questions we received quite a bit on our direct messages ahead of this talk. What do you have to answer to this? Do you think the argument of we have to bring people to justice through an international procedure, whatever, is 100% valid, but do you think that at the same time, because this obviously takes many years and people who are not within the jurisdiction of those courts can be convicted but don't necessarily end up in prison, do you think that in the meanwhile sanctions are the way forward? Is that what government should be doing, or is it something else?
No, I completely agree that sanction is what we need to be doing. How are we going to, for example, while the United States is having this embargo and is listening to the Cuban community, because who are advocating for a blockage between United States relations and Cuba is the same Cuban American community in there that are advocating for this. And what we do want is sanctions. We don't want any negotiations with this regime. This is actually a mafia, and we know about this. And Europe knows about this as well. They're doing this, because like just until 2017, they had the Commons position, which was like, we will not negotiate with the Cuban regime because of like human rights violation. What they did was, because they thought that Obama was going to open relations again, they didn't want to be left behind. So they signed the accord to get ahead at the market in Cuba. So what they did was they actually just they betrayed us. Because while the United States and the Cuban community, the largest Cuban exile community, is saying we want sanctions, Europe is telling us, no, sanctions is not the way to go. The way to go is dialogue. But how can Europe, and for me, it's very Eurocentric and colonialist, for us to be saying, hey, what we want is sanction, and for Europe to be telling us, no, what you need is not sanctions, what you need is dialogue. So we do want sanctions. Cuban people want a complete stop with the complicity of the Cuban regime. Whoever advocates for something different have interest in Cuba, because what we need to do is stop this government. They need to vacate, and we need to find justice to able to restore liberty and democracy in Cuba. Otherwise, we will never achieve it, and it's a long road. We have been fighting for this 62 years because the international community has just been paying attention to something else.
Thank you for this. I think Andrea will be promoting Anita so she can ask you her question directly. And I think her question is quite linked. Oh, perfect. She's here.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, Leo.
Hello.
Very nice to talk to you. And honestly, you've partly, first of all, thank you for sharing your personal story as well as how the situation is. It's very eye-opening, I think, and also, like, I think you've partly already replied to my question. That was, do you think we should we're in Brussels. I mean, I'm here with Charlotte, the other local team leader, and in Brussels. And my question was, do you think that we should drop, or that we should advocate for the EU to drop the cooperation agreement? But you partly already replied to this question. And so, linked to this, I would have a question that is probably more personal, but like, what can we do again to make you feel safer, and especially to make you or your family feel safer in a way, because I do understand that you've been in exile since you were 9. So I really would like to get a practical practical example, because I do understand that I do not have the power to lift embargoes and everything, but I do have the power to raise my voice, and especially especially given that we are in Europe, what can Europe do?
Well, I thank you for your kind words. So I think what Europe can do is really just stop the agreement. Mm-hmm. Just like go back to the Commons position, where just like we need to condition any kind of help and negotiation, economic negotiation with Cuba. We need to be able to get like human rights guarantees. Like, we are not having this in Cuba when Europe has been built on the respect of human rights, and we are negotiating and we're doing business with tyrants. We are negating our the own principles where the EU was formed. So that's one thing. It's I think what we can do from Brussels, and what you can do from Brussels, is like come and support us in our protest. Like every month we are trying to do one every month. And but we're also open, or at least I'm open to supporting the Fridays for Freedom movement, which if you are in Brussels, and I feel, for example, and I know that the 11th of March the Uyghur in Belgium are going to have a protest in front of the Chinese embassy. And I think what we need to do is be able to get together all the different communities and support each other. If, for example, like if I know that the Uyghurs are protesting in front of the Chinese embassy, I will go there to help them, because I want them to come whenever I have to do, my protest. So what we need to do is create synergies and start, supporting each other, because at the end of the day, it's the same battle. We are fighting communist, Stalinist, Maoist regimes. That's really what we're fighting. Democracy, the fight for democracies today are against communism. Look at all the countries that are fighting for democracy. It's communism what we're fighting. The Cold War is not really over. We still have the same struggle. Like this, we still have the same, fight for dominance. And in Cuba, for us, in any regard, we have not stopped. We have the same struggle. While different countries have, transition into democracies, we are still under this regime. So, and we're really counting, for example, on countries like the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Latvia, and all these countries that were at one part of the Soviet Union and that are now part of the European Union, to really help us and support us, because they know what our struggle is. They have lived exactly the same thing that we will hope to achieve in Cuba. So basically, just whenever we have a protest, come out, join us. Whenever if you want to talk, like I'm always open to conversation, because I think the most important thing is for people to share stories and to really talk, and that's how we will really create awareness. Like I think that what we're doing here is already a big thing, because we're sharing points of view between people who have never really talked to each other before. So for me, it's great already.
That's true. And the good thing is that Leo and Anita, you are in the same city, so you can also connect later on. So thank you, Anita and Charlotte. I will now demote you and promote Zoe as soon as I find her. She has a question as well.
And everyone, please introduce yourself when you ask your questions as well.
Hi, Leo. This is Zoe.
Hello.
I have one question, because I just want to ask, why do you want to advocate for Cuban? Because you left at 9 years old, and you live in the United States, which I suppose you have much better life. And I just wonder, how did you build up this Cuban identity? Because I think 9 years old is still quite young. So yeah, how's your personal story growing up in the US, and why you still want to advocate for your country?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The reason why I advocate for Cuban freedom is because I have in French we say devoir à la mémoire, which is, this, let me see if I can find the words in English. Colombe,
I'm trying to find the translation at the same time, but it's basically having a duty to memory. It's like a historical duty to do what
exactly
translation, but yes.
Yeah, to my own family. For example, like my grandfather died and he was not able to see freedom in Cuba. My father died and he was not able to see freedom in Cuba. It is up to me to be able to do everything I can to be able to redeem what they suffered. My father, my grandfather, all my uncles were all political prisoners, people who were tortured with bayonets, like they would just stuck bayonets in their legs because they didn't want to march with the military and stuff like this. So when you grow up in the United States, even if you leave Cuba at 9 years old, you carry on with yourself your family history, where yes, you're uprooted, but you grow up with this absence, with this presence of an absence, where that something is missing, and what is missing is the roots. We grow up hearing stories. Even if I grew up in the United States, I knew that my whole life my duty was to be able to speak about why we left. As a kid, I have very traumatic memories, because for example, in school, at 4 years old, I remember my first interrogations with military officials, because I was a son of a political dissident. So when you have this scars, and you actually have this, memories, for example, of repudiation, where they will bring you and put you in front of your whole school yard with all your classmates, for them to start telling you insults, it's something that you feel like, you know, you can never forget this. Even if I have freedom, it is my duty to never forgive this, because like if we forgive, then we're betraying our own history. And that's the most honest question I can the answer that I can give you. Like, I feel that I need to do this because there were crimes committed in my own family, like in the thousands of families of other Cubans, that cannot be left unheard, that cannot be left unpunished. And we will find justice for this. If it's not me, it will be, for example, my other generation. For example, I have 14 nephews and nieces, and they were born in the United States, right? But even if they were born in the United States, they know the injustices that have happened to our family. They know the traumas that have happened to our families. So we carry this on. We carry this because we're exiles. We're not immigrants. We didn't leave Cuba because we wanted to leave Cuba. We left Cuba because we were ejected. We were déracinés. We were told, you know, leave, because if you stay, we will kill you. Like this that's how it got. So we can never forget this. Even in freedom, you still feel that, you know, the traumas that you live as a child never go. And for example, my mother and my brothers and sisters, they don't have the capacity to be able to hold a conversation about Cuba and freedom and democracy. Why? Because since they left Cuba, they had to start working. I was the only person in my family that was able to graduate high school and go to college, even though I left because I was the one that was saved from this regime. So it is my duty to be able to speak not only for my family's experience and my own experience, but for the experience of the basic Cuban nation, which is a history of exile, really, what we're doing. So I don't know if I answer a question.
I bet that you answered the question well. Zoe, I'm going to demote you, and then if you have another question, just write in the chat. I have actually a question for Lee as well, because, you know, hearing all of these, obviously you think about, as you mentioned, China or other regimes, where at least, I mean, you understand that in China, there is still a case for some, at least part of the population, to support the regime, like honestly, not politically as well, because it brought massive economic growth to the country, right? So it has uplifted a lot of people from extreme poverty to middle class in a very rapid time. So some people might say, okay, I want to bargain my political freedoms for some economic benefits. And this is how I think so far the Chinese regime is holding up. How come in Cuba for such a long time, kind of the regime has stayed there? And I mean, you mentioned some dissidents and some small revolutions, but still there's not been a big uproar or a big inner fight, despite the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, Cuba is not doing so well economically. You mentioned it as well, like people are struggling, there's very little freedom of starting a business, you can't even fish in your waters. So what's the case for the regime to keep this grab on power? What's their narrative that they are selling to those people that I suppose at least part of population support or is okay with having this regime?
Yeah, I think that this has to go to the indoctrination that we receive as like school children from the very beginning, from like 4 years old. You every morning you have to get information like a military. You need to salute the flag like the military, and then after you finish like the national hymn, you actually have to say, we're pioneers for communism, we will be like Che Guevara. So this is every day for 18 years. So you're brainwashing, you know, this population of like, this is the only way, this is our enemy. So it's ferocious. Like like Cuba does not educate, Cuba indoctrinates. So like when you have a population where for a long time they have been told that we are basically the light of Latin America, that we are the ones who are doing the sacrifice for Latin America, that we are a beacon of light, you know, so they create all this narrative that they create this false responsibility that we are going to be the new system, the new world starts with a communist regime like Cuba. So what they are pushing for is for like this whole world to be like one communist regime. And this is really in their idea that we're all brothers, we're all like, you know, sorry, I have my dog coming in. I have a German Shepherd. No one's attacking me. So basically, you know, I think that's the false sense of nationalism, that, you know, that we are responsible, that we have this, like, you know, they're always telling us that we were under attack by the capitalist neoliberalism, and like, so basically, like, they have created this paranoia and this like enemy constantly that we're like, they're afraid of. And since Cubans do not have like democratic memory, like change for us is it's scary. So the only salvation is the ones who leave, and, you know, do have like nice lives, and they progress and they become wealthy, is because, you know, the spirit of the Cuban people, we want to progress. So how does it come that in Cuba, we, like, our country is falling apart? And how come in Cuba, when we go into exile, we're a prosperous like exile community? Is because we don't have the chances to actually, like, you know, have entrepreneurship, nothing. We have no ability to actually evolve. For example, like I always tell people that if you really want to see the state and the health of a nation, you have to look at their architecture. And the architecture of a nation will tell you exactly how the reality that they're living. Look at Cuba. Cuba have beautiful buildings that were like, you know, patrimony from the remnants of the European colony. And now that's all falling apart. People are living under, like, you know, a misery and awful conditions. When we look, for example, like at Havana, we put like Syria next to it, you cannot tell which one's Syria, which one's Havana, because like the state of like destruction is the same. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think I left a little more on the time. But
I think it makes a lot of sense, and it explains, I think, to people who didn't look at the Cuban struggle, why people would keep on supporting the regime, or at least not stand up to it, beyond, of course, fear, oppression, and fear for your life. The fact that you have a sense of it's our duty, we're going to change the world, etc. I see that.
Sorry, Colombe, just one thing. And the other thing is that from the very beginning, any dissident who disagreed was either disappeared, in jail, or killed, or exiled. So the repression has been so much that people are saying, like, you know what, we can't do anything. Like, we are defenseless. We are a country with no arms.
Yes, it's true. I didn't mention as well the fact that a lot of the opposition is in exile, which makes resisting even harder. I think we have 10 minutes left before the Zoom call ends. So we have still so many questions for you, but I see that Fabian is raising his hand. So let's promote Fabian so he can ask his question.
Fabian from Ecuador, so representative of Latin America as well. Go, Fabian.
Oh, thank you. Hola, Leo.
Hola.
Hi, Leo, and hi, everybody. I think it's very hard to make an opinion about a system that you don't experience. I'm talking from my country. I haven't experienced what has happened to Cuba, but something is on my mind, and in order to understand how politics and the systems are changing our countries, I want to ask you this, because it seems to me that you said that the opposite of freedom is socialism. That's why I understand. But what I think is that in countries like Ecuador, if you go backwards, I don't know, 25 years in time, you can find democratic governments that go against human rights and disappear people and just pay attention to the capital, which is the other side. So my question concretely is, you think that the opposite of freedom is socialism, or do you think that we should think of something else, or we have to build something else, which is not socialism, not capitalism? Because I think those two ways of govern a country are not the answer. What do you think about it?
Okay, so you know what I experienced in Cuba, what my family has experienced in Cuba is not socialism. It's really a communist mafia, which is really we can't really call that socialism. So I couldn't tell you if social. So that's the one thing. Cuba is not socialism. Cuba is a communist mafia that has just been there controlling us for 62 years, and through a monopoly of force. So I don't think that like anarchism or like capitalism is the solution to all the world's problem, but I definitely know that it's in this system that we actually see the human actually develop all its talents. We don't see this in socialism. We don't see this, for example, like in or at least when I speak about Cuba, I speak about communism, because I really couldn't tell you the difference. What's the difference between communism and socialism? Because they have distorted this concepts for us. Like, for example, when we leave Cuba, for us, we think socialist communism and everything that ends in ism for us is bad. All we want to do is liberty. All we have in our mind is freedom. We just want to be able to go to a country or a place with a system that we feel that we are free. We don't feel this in Cuba. So I cannot speak to you about your country's experience. I can only assure you of my own experience, which is for us, communism has been a failure and has been really the decadence of our country. So in Cuba, what we need is definitely not socialism nor communism. We need liberalism, because what we need is freedom now. Like, we have experienced like a downfall for the last 62 years, like hoping that everyone is going to be equal. And yes, we have achieved equality in misery.
Thank you for this, Leo. I think one thing to mention for the audience that will be watching this online as well is I think socialism has a very different meaning in different geographies. So for example, as a French person, the way I understand it is not a word that is linked for me to communism. It's just, it's a side of the political spectrum within a democratic spectrum, and one that has, for example, dominated French politics for a very long time. I just wanted, France is a very socialist country, for example, but I just wanted to mention this because I think often when we then live stream those events to a very, very international audience, people kind of freak out with the way we use different words, just because we all have very different understandings of them across the world. We are almost running out of time. So before we close, I have a question for you, and this is a very self-promotional question for now as well. As you know, because we discussed it in the past, we advocate for the creation of a League of Democracies. So basically what it is for democratic powers across the world to come together to, one, support freedom fighters and democratic struggles, not only, but also hold democracies accountable, because it's something we didn't talk about in this chat, but there's no democratic regime that is perfect. Democracy has shortfalls everywhere, and we need to improve it. And we need to hold each other accountable, even in democratic countries, for it. And then the last aim about this League of Democracy is to innovate democracy. So to use all of the amazing opportunities of new technologies and so on to make sure that more people can participate, etc. I think the first part of this idea of the League of Democracy is something that could be useful to Cuba. The idea that you would have more countries, not just the US talking in isolation, but the US coming with all democracies across the world, from Taiwan to South Africa to countries in the EU and so on, coming together to impose coordinated targeted sanctions or else. Are you in favor of this League of Democracies? Would you like to see this coming into effect so that we can support the Cuban people across the world?
Of course. I think it's a great idea. I mean, count with my support in anything that that I could do or help in promoting this idea. I think the only way we were actually find equality in the world, because everyone has this idea that we want everyone to have like the same equality around the world, but we cannot achieve equality until everyone is free. So while we have like countries that are like regimes and totalitarian regimes where people are slaves to these systems, and while we have other countries that are free, we will never have an equal equality in the world. So like I think a League of Democracy great ideas, because we do need the people who are free to advocate for those who don't have freedom. Because those who are not free not because they don't want to, but because their freedom has been taken away by them, and usually it has been taken away by them by force, and there are guns that point at them if they dare to raise their voice. So it is a great idea, and I support this wholeheartedly, and I hope that we actually do see legal democracies, and that we hold totalitarian regimes accountable for their crimes.
Thank you so much, Leo. I have a closing question that you can use as your closing statement. There is, what's your hope for Cuba? Do you see you're gonna see freedom in the next years, decades, in your lifetime? And with this, obviously, we're gonna also close the events, but please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really do hope to see freedom during my lifetime. I don't know if it's going to come within the next year or if it's going to be in the next 5, 10, 20 years. What I do know is that I will be advocating for this to happen, that I will be an active voice against this regime, and that I will do everything I can to raise awareness to restore democracy in Cuba. I think we need to just remember that it's only together that we're going to actually be able to create pressure in the international community. I know that, for example, today I have a meeting with Venezuelan representative, Nicaraguan, and the Uyghurs in Belgium, because we are trying to get together here, at least what we're doing here in Belgium. And I think we're in a privileged place to actually raise this awareness, at least at the European level. And what I do hope for Cuba is to see Cuba flourished, to see my people free, to see my country prosper, to be able to go back to the place where I was born, and be able to walk around, my land, and just feel I'm here, and I'm not going to be shot or be expelled from here, because it's free now. And I want to have that experience, and that's what I really hope for. And I think the only way to achieving this is if we actually do get the international community to support us and to hold the tyrants accountable. We need to have justice be brought to Cuba, because we don't have any justice for the past 62 years. And with that, thank you.
No, thank you, Leo, and thank you everyone for joining. I think this is a very important topic, and I'm glad we get to raise awareness. As we said, this will not just stay within this closed community. We will advertise this event online later, and Zoe will create clips out of it to try to raise awareness in the months, weeks, days to come about what's happening in Cuba, what we can all do to support the Cuban people, and the responsibility of governments not to just engage in a normal way with the current regime. So I think it's been extremely useful for everyone. I would encourage every attendee and everyone who will watch this later on social media to do one thing, which is act. Don't just stay behind your computer and be like, good, today I learned something new. We need another step to action. So do whatever you prefer, whether it's signing petitions, sharing on social media what's happening, joining Leo's organization's petitions online to make sure that the EU is lobbied on this topic, or joining Fridays for Freedom. And we will be posting the link to a petition for League of Democracies everywhere as well. But make sure you take action and support people fighting for freedom. And I'll conclude with one last remark. I remember, Leo, you said this in our virtual protest a couple of weeks ago. When you meet someone from Cuba, listen to them. Listen to their struggle and listen to their stories. And I think that's something that we keep on hearing from everyone across the world that we meet that is going through a struggle for freedom and democracy, is we all need to learn from what is happening and first listen to the solutions that the people concerned are advocating for. So with those closing remarks, thank you so much everyone for joining, and I hope we'll be able to collaborate some more.
Thank you.